The ultimatum arrived on a Tuesday
Surrender
morning,
now,
broadcast
or face
simultaneously
total
into
annihilation.
every radio frequency, television signal, and satellite uplink on the planet, overriding every scheduled program, with a single, unbroken message in perfect, toneless English. This is High Regent Sulthane Var of the Christian Empire, speaking for the Seven Systems and the Undying Throne. Your world has been surveyed, catalogued, and found undefended. You have 30 of your local rotations to surrender your governments, your resources, and your species to imperial administration. Resistance will be treated as forfeiture of the right to exist. This is not a request. Then the signal cut, and the world sat in stunned silence for exactly 4 seconds, before every phone on Earth began ringing at once. President Elena Marsh watched the message replay on a wall of screens inside the White House Situation Room, flanked by generals who looked, for the first time in their careers, entirely out of their depth. "Is this real?" she asked. Dr. Hideo Tanaka, NASA's chief of planetary defense, didn't look up from his tablet. The signal originated from an object currently sitting at the edge of the asteroid belt. Mass estimate, based on gravitational displacement, puts it somewhere between 40 and 60 kilometers in length. "That's not a ship, Madam President, that's a city that flies. And our response capability?" Silence answered her, which was answer enough. 30 days, that was what the Empire had given them. 30 days, to decide whether 4 billion years of independent evolution would end in quiet surrender or defiant ruin. It was, Sulthane Var would later admit in his private logs, more time than the Christian Empire had ever extended to a target world. Most species surrendered within the first hour of contact. Once Imperial scout vessels demonstrated even a fraction of their weaponry, Earth's continued silence intrigued him more than it worried him. The Christians had conquered 81 inhabited worlds in 11 centuries of expansion. Not one had ever mounted an armada capable of threatening the Undying Throne's forces. Earth, with its scattered nations and primitive fission reactors, would not be the first. He did not know about Site Meridian. Site Meridian had existed, in one form or another, since 1962, a joint, deeply classified initiative born in the darkest days of the Cold War, when two terrified superpowers realized that the greatest threat to humanity might not come from each other, but from somewhere much farther away. What began as a modest research program studying recovered fragments of unexplained technology, debris that official records still listed as meteorological anomalies, had grown, over 60 years and 3 generations of scientists, into something far larger, a hidden shipyard buried beneath the Nevada desert, where humanity had quietly, patiently, built itself an insurance policy against exactly this day. Admiral Rosa Delgado had commanded Site Meridian for the last 9 years, and in all that time, she had never truly believed she would need to use what was hidden there. Now, standing in the command bunker with the Christian ultimatum still echoing through every speaker on the planet, she opened a communication channel to the 12 heads of state who had known Site Meridian existed. "It's time," she said simply. Within 6 hours, the Ares fleet, 31 vessels built from 6 decades of reverse-engineered technology, refined by human ingenuity into something the Christians had never encountered, began waking from 6 decades of silent dormancy. Sulthane Var's scout vessels detected the launch 18 days into the 30-day ultimatum window, and for the first time in his 400-year career, the High Regent felt something unfamiliar stir beneath his composure, uncertainty. 31 vessels, his tactical officer, Krin Asa reported. Configuration unlike anything in the Imperial database. Propulsion signature suggests a hybrid drive. Neither our gravitic folding technology nor anything matching primitive human fission designs. "Impossible," Var said. "Our survey teams cataloged this world's technology as Tier 1, chemical rockets, orbital satellites, nothing beyond that. Apparently, Regent, the survey was incomplete." Var studied the tactical display, watching 31 small, defiant points of light rise from Earth's surface and begin, with unmistakable purpose, moving toward the edge of the solar system where his flagship waited. "Recall the second and third fleets from standby," he ordered. "I want the full Christian presence in this system within the week. Whatever these humans have built, we will not repeat the mistake of underestimating them a second time." But the mistake, in truth, had already been made. it had been made the moment Var assumed Earth's silence meant helplessness rather than preparation. The Ares fleet was not, by galactic standards, an especially large armada. 31 ships, crewed by fewer than 9,000 men and women, most of them under the age of 40, all of them trained in simulations that had run continuously for decades in anticipation of a day, none of them, had truly expected to see. What the fleet lacked in size, however, it made up for in a weapon the Chrysian Empire had never encountered in 11 centuries of conquest. Adaptive warfare. Every Chrysian victory in 81 campaigns had followed the same pattern. Overwhelming force applied with total confidence against enemies who fought using fixed, predictable doctrines. The Empire's ships were powerful, yes, their weapons devastating, their armor near impenetrable by any technology their victims had ever possessed. But they had never needed to innovate, because they had never needed to. Every enemy fleet before Earth's had fought the same battle the Chrysians expected them to fight, Site, Meridian Science. Drawing on 60 years of studying fragments of alien technology recovered from crash sites, unexplained signals, and one particularly fateful encounter in 1977 that remained classified to this day, had built something different, a fleet whose central computing systems could analyze enemy tactics in real time and rewrite their own combat protocols mid-battle, learning and adapting faster than any organic mind could track. "They won't know what to do with us," Delgado told her assembled captains in the final briefing before departure. "Because we're not going to fight the way they expect anyone to fight. We're going to fight the way we fight. Messy, unpredictable, and absolutely relentless." The battle began on the 23rd day of the Ultimatum, at the edge of the asteroid belt, where Var's assembled fleet, now numbering 120 vessels, drawn from 3 separate Imperial task forces, waited in tight, disciplined formation. The Ares fleet did not approach in formation at all. Instead, its 31 ships scattered the moment they crossed into weapons range, breaking into seemingly chaotic, individual trajectories that made no tactical sense by any doctrine in the Imperial database. Var's tactical computers, trained on 11 centuries of conventional warfare, struggled to calculate an intercept pattern for an enemy that appeared to have no coordinated strategy at all. It was, of course, exactly the point. "Concentrate fire on the largest signature," Var ordered, watching the human flagship, Delgado's own vessel, the Meridian's Promise, cut a strange, looping path through the battle space. "Ignore the smaller vessels. Destroy their command ship, and the rest will scatter." But the Meridian's Promise was not in fact coordinating the fleet at all. Each of the 31 Ares vessels carried its own adaptive combat intelligence, capable of independent decision-making, sharing tactical data across the fleet in a decentralized network that had no single point of failure. When Chrysian warships concentrated their devastating plasma cannons on Delgado's flagship, the Meridian's Promise simply became bait. A sacrifice the fleet had planned for from the very beginning. While the bulk of the Imperial fleet fixated on a single target, the remaining 30 Ares vessels closed in from 30 different angles, each one firing weapons calibrated, through 6 decades of study, to exploit a specific weakness in Chrysian shield harmonics that Var's engineers had never imagined an enemy could identify, let alone target. The Chrysian shields, designed to disperse conventional energy weapons across their entire surface, had no defense against 31 precisely tuned resonance strikes, arriving in staggered sequence, each one weakening the shield lattice just enough for the next to punch through. The first Imperial cruiser fell in absolute silence. No explosion, no debris, simply a sudden and total loss of power as its shields collapsed and its reactor core, exposed to the harsh radiation of open space, went dark forever. Then a second, a third. Var watched his tactical display in mounting disbelief as ship after ship of his 120-vessel fleet fell to an enemy his own survey teams had assured him was Tier 1, defenseless, primitive. "Regent," Kryn Asa said, voice tight with something that, in a Chrysian officer, was as close to fear as their species allowed itself to express. "At current losses, we will have no functional fleet remaining within the hour." "Then we do not fight fair either," Var snapped. "Bring the Undying's Wrath forward, full planetary bombardment array. If we cannot defeat their fleet, we remove the reason they are fighting. It was a desperate order, and both officers knew it, a threat against Earth itself, meant to force the Ares fleet into a defensive posture that would break its adaptive advantage. But desperation, Var was learning too late, was not a strategy the Chrysian Empire had ever needed to master, and its execution showed every sign of that inexperience. The Undying's Wrath, Var's flagship, and the single most powerful vessel in the assembled fleet, turned its bow toward Earth and began charging its planetary bombardment array, a weapon capable, in theory, of rendering the surface of an inhabited world uninhabitable within minutes. It never fired. Admiral Delgado, watching from the Meridian's promise, badly damaged but, against all Chrysian expectation, still very much alive and in command, had anticipated exactly this desperate escalation. 4 of the Ares fleet's vessels, held in reserve throughout the battle specifically for this contingency, converged on the Undying's Wrath, from below its detection arc, striking not at its shields but at the reactor structure feeding its bombardment array. The resulting explosion was visible, faintly, from Earth's surface that night, a brief, silent flare against the darkness, gone before most of the planet's population even looked up to see it. The battle ended 6 hours after it began. Of the 120 ships the Chrysian Empire had brought to conquer a world it believed utterly defenseless, only 19 survived, fleeing in scattered retreat toward the edge of the system, their shields failing, their weapons spent, their absolute certainty of victory shattered along with their fleet high regent, Sulthane Var Sar did not survive the destruction of the Undying's Wrath. His final transmission, recovered later from a damaged escape pod's black box, consisted of a single, unfinished sentence: the survey was wrong. This world was never. The Ares fleet, battered but victorious, lost 6 vessels and 311 crew members that day, a devastating cost by human reckoning, but a victory so complete, so far beyond anything the Chrysian Empire had ever encountered in 11 centuries of conquest, that the surviving 19 ships did not stop retreating until they had crossed back into imperial territory, carrying with them a warning that would echo through every world under the Undying Throne, for generations to come. 6 months later, Admiral Rosa Delgado stood before the assembled leaders of Earth's 12 nations, delivering a report that would remain long classified for decades, but whose central truth would quietly shape the planet's next century. They called us Tier 1, she said. Undefended, primitive. They based an empire's confidence on 81 easy victories and assumed the 82nd would be the same. She paused, looking out at the faces of leaders who, 6 months earlier, had believed their world's fate rested on nothing more than luck. They forgot to ask what happens when a species spends 60 years quietly preparing for a war it hoped would never come. Above Earth, in the colossal silence of high orbit, the surviving vessels of the Ares fleet kept watch, their sensors trained outward toward the dark between the stars. Waiting, patiently, and without arrogance. For whatever the Chrysian Empire, humbled and diminished, might one day decide to send next, it never came, not in Delgado's lifetime, nor in the lifetimes of the children who would one day inherit Site Meridian's long, quiet vigil. The empire that had conquered 81 worlds without ever tasting defeat had finally learned. At devastating cost, the one lesson every conqueror eventually must. That certainty is not the same as strength, and that the deadliest enemy is always the one you never thought to fear.